Welcome to Pachehra Talks channel. My name is Arun and I'm solutions architect with Rackspace Technology, which is one of the best organization to work with. And this is my channel and my views. And today we are going to talk about designing a virtual machine. That's the second video in the series of designing a compute solution. Yes. That is the series that we are following in AZ-305, this module. We learn about the various compute services that Azure provides, and we are trying to find out how to design each service one by one. So let's get started. In this designing a virtual machine, I've prepared a checklist. And this checklist is important because we need to think of all these things: virtual network, name of the VM, location, size, pricing, storage, and operating system. Because these things will construct the design idea for the virtual machine. So let's try to understand one by one why these things are important and what we need to consider or think about in these particular services. So the very first is virtual network. We all know we cannot create a virtual machine in Azure without a virtual network, right? Even if we do not have a virtual network and we try to create a VM, Azure creates a virtual network automatically for us. Well, now, let's talk about the environment where actually some workloads are running. So we cannot just simply go ahead and create a virtual machine. We need to think about the virtual network. We need to spend some time thinking about the configuration, network addresses, subnets. It may possible you have a hybrid environment. So you have on-premises network. So you want to carefully consider the network topology before creating a virtual machine just like anywhere. So why virtual network is important? Because we are going to run the VM on the virtual network, and this virtual network is the boundary. This virtual network will help you from the security perspective as well, because if there is an on-prem, or if you think about the zero trust, there is assume breach. So we have to do that segmentation so that there would not be a lateral movement. So yes, you have to spend some time, think for network topology, network addresses. Why network addresses? Because we have to think for the overlapping IP addresses if you want to do the site-to-site VPN or peering. So you don't want those things, because once the virtual network is created, you have those IPs. You cannot change those IPs, but you can add more. So you have to think for the virtual network. If you are deploying a PaaS service, you need not to worry about the virtual network, but you can again hook up your PaaS services through private endpoint to the virtual network to make the traffic private. Well, that's a different conversation. But here we're talking about virtual machine. So the very first thing we need to think for or design for is virtual network, segmentation, addresses, right? The next thing is name of the virtual machine. You must be wondering why the name is important. Well, that is clear. People don't put much thought into the name of the VM if they are doing it by themselves. But if they are requesting an architect to design their environment, then of course architect guide them towards the naming conventions and tags and those things. But why the name is important, question arises. Well, it's because name defines a manageable Azure resource, and it's also not easy to change when it is created. That's the catch. Yes, you have to change the name. You need to delete and recreate the VM. So choose names that are meaningful and consistent so you can easily identify what the VM does, right? For example, we use as per the environment. If it's a dev environment, then put DEV at the beginning, or maybe at the mid or at the end. If it is a production, use PRD. If it is, if you're thinking about location, then for example, it's US East, then USE. If it is West Europe, then WE. You can use those conventions. If it's a web server, WEB. If it's app server, APP, those things. So this will help you to manage it properly, and it will help you to keep things in check and less mistakes, because once you see PRD, you would be like absolutely conscious because it's a production server. So that's why. And you cannot change the name once it's created. So that's another thing. Now, location. Well, look, why location is important? Well, there are so many reasons, because you should create your VM where your, even when you create the virtual network to create inside, you need to check the location. And Azure has data centers all over the world filled with servers and disks. So these data centers are grouped into geographies like West US, North Europe, Asia, to provide redundancy and availability. So each VM in a region where you want your resources to spin up or to be allocated, regional location lets you place your VMs as close as possible to your users, right? Maybe you are in India, but the kind of content you are creating, your maximum user base is in US. So you can simply go and create your VMs and run your workloads in the US next to users, right? So this location can improve performance and ensure you meet any legal and compliance or tax requirements. Now, the location also makes you think, because pricing is also depend on the location. If you want to create a cost optimized, cost is something that you are looking for, only cost, because every region has a different cost. So you can find the cheapest region to deploy your machines. Maybe these machines are not publicly accessible. Maybe these machines are something that you want to deploy for some internal regions. There is no availability, scalability, performance which is required. So you could choose for those regions as well. There could be many other regions, reasons to create your workloads, yeah, cheapest region. And another thing is, every region doesn't have everything. So you need to keep on checking, because even if you're following the Azure update series of mine, where I keep on updating the new things, you'll find in every update there are some SKUs which are now generally available in particular region. They are like, there was no availability zone in UAE, but recently they have introduced. So you need to think for these two things as well. Availability of services and the cost. So that's why location is important. Now, the most important thing, size of the VM. Well, once you have the name and location set, you need to decide the size of the VM. Even if you follow the wizard, that's how it goes, right? And size means different kind of capacity of memory or storage options that different VMs has. The best way to determine the appropriate VM size is to consider the type of workload your VM needs to run, like memory optimize or storage optimize or general purpose, those kind. And based on the workload, you can choose the correct VM size from the abundance of sizes which are available as per the need. And I'll show you that in the next slide, this one, so that this will help you. But you need not to mug up these things. You can simply, whenever you are designing your architecture, you can simply go to this link where it shows. This is, I borrowed this from Microsoft. There is a link. I'll share it in the description, or you can simply type in the Google VM size images. VM, Azure VM sizes and SKUs. The very first link is the same one. So another thing is pricing. Yes, pricing is always important, because Hyperscalers or cloud is CapEx. Or yes, you got me. It's OpEx. Yes, it's OpEx. So there are two separate cost uh, of VMs. Because why two separate costs? Because there's two things: compute and storage. So that's why there are two costs: compute cost and the storage cost. Compute expenses are priced on a per hour basis, as you see, like pay as you go. And whenever we go and create a VM, there is a per hour basis charge which is there. But you are billed as per minute basis. For example, you have chosen a VM which is like 100 would be very high. Let's give like $10 per hour. It's a big VM, $10 per hour, and you only run for 40 minutes. So it would be charged only for the 40 minutes. You're not charged for compute capacity if you stop and allocate the VM. That's why if you're using your development workload or any virtual machine per se, which are not in use 24/7 and not reserved, then you can simply go ahead and allocate that virtual machine and save you money. And this hourly price is not constant. It varies based on the VM size and operating system. And you can easily understand why, because VM size is all about memory and storage. More memory, more cost. And OS, of course. Now, if you talk about storage cost, you are charged separately for the storage of the VM uses. The status of VM has no relation with the storage charges that will be there. What it means, it simply means if you shut down your VM or put it on allocated state, deallocated state, sorry, then only the compute cost would not be there, but storage still there because your data is still there, right? So you're always charged for the storage used by the disks. And that takes us to the next option, storage option. Yes, disk is the storage, right? So managed disk handle Azure storage account creation and management in the background for you. We need to specify the disk size as per the performance, because there are two kinds, standard or premium. If we are running production workload, and of course go with the premium SSDs, but you can also choose the standard as per the workload, and Azure creates and manages those disks. That's why these are managed disk. And as you add disk or scale the VM up and down, you don't have to worry about the storage being used. You can, if again, if you're following the Azure updates, then you could have that noted right here. For example, if you have to extend the disk, earlier you have to shut down the VM and then extend the disk and then turn on the VM or detach the disk from the VM. But now I think this is in generally available that you can extend the disk while VM is running. Not for all the VM SKUs, but there are some for which you can do that. We have recently talked about this in our Azure updates. So always follow the Azure updates, because you don't know, if you're not following it, there's so many new things coming and you're still stuck to the old knowledge. So let's come to the operating system. Azure provides various OS images. We all know that they are like Windows. They have to be Windows. It's Microsoft. And of course, the flavors of Linux, various versions of Windows, let's put it this way. And Azure bundles the cost of OS license into the price. It's not like you have to, just like old days, no need to buy the license from outside. It is there in the price. So if you're looking for more than just base OS images, you can search from the Azure marketplace. You will find the images with the SQL embedded in it, maybe the WordPress image or PHP image or Apache server image. So you need not to go and install those things. It is there by default in the image. So instead of setting up and configuring each component, you can install a marketplace image and get the entire stack all at once. And lastly, if you can't find a suitable OS image, you can create your own disk image. Your disk image can then be uploaded to Azure storage and used to create an Azure VM. Keep in mind that Azure only supports 64-bit OS. So if you are customizing, make sure it is 64-bit. Now, there is a lot to think about when planning for virtual machines, take a few minutes to think through what you have gone through this video, all those things that we talked about, and plan carefully, and then deploy a virtual machine like a veteran architect, not like just deploy it. See? And as promised, next slide is VM sizes. As you can see, there are different VM sizes, from general purpose, compute optimized, memory optimized, storage optimized, GPU, and high performance compute. So these SKUs, as you can see, DSV3, DV, FS, EVS, LS, NC. There are different SKUs for these can categorize, these can help you. If you have the workload which is memory optimized, you can simply come here and choose the right appropriate VM. Okay, so this is something which is very important whenever you choose VM size. You need to know what kind of workload it is. You need to know which size would be the best fit. Or don't worry, you can resize your VMs, but it will require a boot. So always plan accordingly and choose the right size. Okay, well, this is all about the designing a virtual machine and things that we need to keep in mind and plan properly. So with that, let's close this video and meet in another one with next compute services. Thank you and take care. Bye-bye.